Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in the afternoon, starting to be really the end of this SB. So thank you for taking the time to join for this discussion. But also thank you to the people who might be online and who might be following the side event. So we're going to start now, and we're very happy to have this event today to share, thanks to our panelists, really issues relating to action for climate empowerment, but also to introduce you to this initiative of the ACE Observatory. So my name is Alexandra, I am from SGI, and I'm also a part of supporting the ACE Observatory, and so I'm very happy to welcome you for this event today. And we have today with us Lasse Bjørn from the Saami Council, who is joining. We have Nathan Cogswell from the World Resource Institute. We're also happy to have two national focal points on action for climate empowerment. We have Massiel Cairo from the Dominican Republic, and we have Johanna Arriagada from Chile, who will be joining the panel today. And we also have Isatis Cintron, who is one of the co-director of the ACE Observatory. So we wanted to, and let me check, Johanna, can you hear us well online?
Yeah, hello everyone.
Thank you very much. So we wanted to start with really a question for all of you, and then maybe a question for each of you on your respective perspective and experiences. So maybe the first question really to all of you would be from your experience, if you can share some good practices of monitoring and reporting of climate governance, capacity building, and or action for climate empowerment in general. So maybe we can go into the order of the panel. So maybe we can start with you, Lasse.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. We have some experience from the Saami territories, so Saami in Sápmi, on, I think, good examples of monitoring. And in the Saami Council, we have one project where we are producing knowledge together with reindeer herders on climate issues. And it's a way of going in with scientists and people and not asking before and what the scientists want to find out, but go to the communities and see what kind of information do they need to develop further we have quite a lot of issues with climate change, grazing lands, so on, for reindeer herding. So for reindeer herders to see that, okay, what kind of information can help us to adapt for the future? What kind of information can help us to fight projects that will need to use our land? So we can say to the government that we are using this land for reindeer herding and we need it to be able to adapt to climate change. Those types of projects where researchers come together with the community to find out information. And that's enhancing the local communities' way of, or the Saami communities' way to adapt to climate change, but also giving knowledge of climate change to the government as well. So that's one of the projects we have in our territories, which I think is useful. Also, consultation with states on issues related to climate change is important, but then we always have the issue of, do we have the right to say no to projects when it comes to that?
Thank you very much, Lasse. Thank you very much. Nathan, to the same question, from your experience, if you can share any good practices.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's exciting to be here today, and thanks for this question. A lot of my work is actually focused on the UNFCCC systems, or the UNFCCC's transparency and reporting systems, which provide an opportunity for ACE reporting and information on ACE, and bringing that information into this process as well. So I just wanted to mention a few items to start that certainly under the Framework Convention, there's an established MRV, measurement, reporting, and verification system, which includes information on greenhouse gas inventories, mitigation actions, but also, very importantly, information on ACE elements, information on elements from Article 6 of the Convention. Also in 2015, when parties adopted the Paris Agreement, they established what we call the Enhanced Transparency Framework, which treats ACE information a little bit differently. The Paris Agreement's Enhanced Transparency Framework doesn't explicitly include information on ACE, but there are still opportunities for parties, especially under the Convention, to bring forward their experiences on ACE and in other areas, capacity building, technology transfer, other areas outside of the traditional sort of greenhouse gas inventories, which get a lot of exposure or attention under the traditional transparency frameworks and systems. And so using the existing processes and thinking about ways to embed ACE and these discussions into those, I think is a very helpful way forward.
Thank you very much. Massiel, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for organizing this discussion. I think it's very important that any possible entity tries to make their way and make the action for climate empowerment heard and more specifically known. That's very important for us that work day by day, trying to spread the word across the board and mainstreaming action for climate empowerment in our public policies whenever possible. In the case of the Dominican Republic, as far as reporting, I would say that one of the good practices, if not the best practices, is trying to include action for climate empowerment in our NDC. And I mentioned the part of reporting because, of course, we expressed our goals that we have towards the action for climate empowerment, but we did so by gathering the information of all the work that we had already been doing since 2010 or so. So I think that is one of the best practices because that is also a way that aids to scale up financing once you have those goals clearly stated in your ND. I think that's something that would ultimately aid to propelling the engagement in ACE is having a legal framework. In our case, in the Dominican Republic, we just have a national decree for MRB, but we are working on including the M and E as far as adaptation, thus we're trying to integrate in any way possible any ACE elements related activities.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much. The mic has been a challenge for me. So thank you very much. Johanna, do you want to also come in on that question?
Yeah, thanks for the question and the others' comment from the colleagues. About the MRB of Chile's experience under the convention, we have a long experience really in the elaboration of the Biennial Update report and also about the national communication. And all of them include the GSG inventory with a time series between 1919 and 2018. And this year we are working in our fifth VR, trying to integrate the new transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. ACE elements we have integrated in our national communication, but only about the progress of activities and not with specific indicators. And it's important to know that we have a quantifiable indicator for the mitigation actions, but not for adaptation and not for ACE. In adaptation and ACE, we have almost progress indicators in our national policies, like the National Action Plan about climate change, the National Adaptation Plan, but we don't have effectiveness indicator for those kind of activities. So that is our challenge. Right now, we have in adaptation, we built in 2020 an climate risk atlas where we have some specific indicator for adaptation, for vulnerability, sensibility, adaptation capacity. So I think that is our point of entry to more specific ACE indicator in this moment. So that's I can share. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Johanna. Thanks very much to all of you. So I went maybe a tiny bit fast at the beginning, but I just wanted to reground ACE, the acronym, so in the convention, which is Action for Climate Empowerment. That includes the aspects of education, training, public awareness, public participation, access to information, and also international cooperation. And so that leads me to the second question that I would like to ask all of you. And Isatis will come at the end to really bring the ACE Observatory. But maybe the second question, and it follows on what you were already starting to talk about, Johanna, a little bit, but the challenges maybe that you see from so you all come from a different perspective. So what would be really interesting now is to hear a little bit from all of you about where do you see the biggest challenges in really effectively implementing ACE. And ACE is big, right? So it goes from education to really right to access information, public participation, etc. So you can really take it from the aspects that most relate to your work as well as from the overall of ACE. And maybe we can start with you then, Johanna, because you were starting to address maybe some of the challenges. So if there are, you want to go a little bit more in depth into these, what do you see are the biggest challenges in really effectively implementing ACE from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that the big challenge is to have like a common understanding of the different indicators for the 6 ACE elements as you mentioned before. Maybe we have some advance in education because we have some comparison between countries about how we have integrated climate change in the curriculum in the formal education, but we don't have a specific indicator for public access to information, participation, awareness, training, and cooperation, international cooperation. So I think that it's necessary to build some standard indicator for different countries that we can take and bring to our national policies about ACE. In this moment in Chile, we have a national ACE strategy, a proposal of an ACE strategy that is in public consultation right now. And after this workshop, we have a specific workshop about our ACE strategy, but we have like big guidelines to implement ACE activities, but we can add in this moment indicator for the effectiveness of each component. I think that is the big challenge of all of us that we are here right now. So yeah, that's I can say. But for example, in access participation, we have a platform where we put all climate change policies for public citizen consideration, and we have some numbers about how many people give comments, how many comments we received. So maybe those kind of indicator we can address. I am not sure. Depend also about the experience and situation and advance of other parties. Or really about the awareness. For example, we have some survey about the perception of climate change between people. Maybe we can have some common survey for all parties that we can take every 2 years, something like that, under the BUR or BTR, so we can have some common information. But we need to develop those kind of indicators, really. That's I can say. Thanks for the question.
Thank you very much for sharing with us these aspects and the specific challenges and also the specific elements that you have put in place. Massiel, do you want to go next?
Thank you. Well, this is a very interesting question because action for climate empowerment looks different for everyone, then everyone is going to have different challenges. And it's important the way you phrase the question, as it is that we need to understand what are the challenges based on our different perspective as to what we work in. So I am a government official, right? I work for the National Council of Climate Change of the Dominican Republic. And I would say that in our case, our biggest challenge is accessing funds, which also caps accessibility to training as far as ACE. Because getting across the message of what ACE is so difficult, being a largely cross-cutting component of the climate change, accessing funding and having not only our local government, but also sometimes donors understand the relevancy and actually trying to build capacity and develop training proposals, I would say is one of our biggest challenges. Not shying away of the indicators that Johanna mentioned, which are also so important in order to be able to properly track, evaluate, and then also report on ACE. But I like to be very cautious when speaking about indicators because, again, not all countries have the same capacities. And the surveys are a very good tool. I remember that before today, we had a lot of discussion about ACE. And we had the chance of having peer-to-peer experiences in different breakout sessions. And I shared our experience in the Dominican Republic where we recently had a KIP survey, which is, in case nobody, for the sake of clearing the acronyms, is a knowledge, attitude, and practices survey. And so that way you can gather information that can really aid into developing or identifying indicators, because that gives you a very good idea of where are the gaps of information, but also where are the needs of information. You have an idea of how much the public is engaging or not engaging as far as public participation, and it really aids to identify where you need to put your biggest efforts. But again, from my perspective, I understand that access to funding is our biggest challenge.
Thank you for sharing, and for I think that's where it's really interesting to really hear from the various perspectives, because ultimately ACE is very much going to be, in as much as it relates to fundamental principles as well, it is very much related to the local context of each area. So maybe now to you, Nathan, from your experience, you shared a little bit where you saw already the intersection, right, between international reporting and ACE. But if you could go a little bit then more in depth into where do you see also the challenges and implementation from your perspective?
Thank you. And I wanted to build off a couple of conversations and a couple of inputs we've already had here. And yes, speaking about the linkages with international reporting. And I think there's a lot of value and importance of including ACE in indices for the purpose of international reporting. I mentioned earlier that Article 13 of the Paris Agreement doesn't explicitly mention reporting on ACE. But an important element of the Paris Agreement reporting and the transparency framework under the Paris Agreement is tracking progress towards your NDC. And so including ACE in your NDC gives you the opportunity to report on ACE, gives you an opportunity to track progress towards your targets, towards your goals, and I think very much related to the discussion on indicators as well. As part of the transparency framework, as part of that tracking progress, you're asked to indicate or to provide an indicator and to then track progress throughout the course of the NDC against that indicator. And so having ACE in the NDC can be helpful for funding. It can also be helpful in this context as well as connecting ACE to the Paris Agreement reporting process as well. And on the challenges for implementation, I think I maybe will continue on the strain of sort of about international reporting. It's a challenge for all countries. There's a lot of, I think all parties come from different starting points. I sort of take that as a given that all countries come to international reporting from various places, from various experiences, be it on greenhouse gas emissions, on ACE, on capacity building, all having very different starting points. And I think that's an important, it's not a challenge, but it's an important recognition. And I guess it can be a challenge when we don't recognize that countries have different starting points for their reporting. I think to borrow an example from reporting on greenhouse gas emission information, it's taken developed country parties some 25 years to build their reporting system. And so that includes, ensuring you have the right data, ensuring you are in contact with the right people, ensuring that you're able to pull the various pieces together necessary to provide the information that's useful both for your domestic context, but also for the international context. So I think the challenges in this sense of implementing reporting and thinking about knowledge sharing on ACE is recognizing various starting points, realizing that it takes time, that you learn by doing, that your first report, your first attempt to share information on ACE isn't going to be perfect. Your second attempt or your second report won't be perfect, but you continue to be able to provide more information, more comprehensive information, more sort of usable, actionable information, and that process of learning by doing, by enhancing reporting over time, is, I think, very certainly key to implementation.
Thank you very much. These are really very interesting points, and so I think that now I would like to go back to you, Lasse, with the question, as we know that aspect of ACE that really relates to also these specific rights to, at the deep level, it's really these rights to participate, to access information. So maybe in terms of looking at challenges of implementation from your own perspective as really coming from an indigenous peoples, could you share from that perspective as well, where do you see the challenges? Maybe also you were mentioning a little bit capacity building, but like in general, maybe where do you see challenges of implementation?
I could start to tell about with my group of friends of young Saami indigenous peoples with reindeer herders. One of the most common fields of study is not biology, not veterinarian, it's law. And it's because we need to fight for our lands, our rights to have our own culture, and our rights to live the lives we want to live. And reindeer herders doesn't really want to do law, but they feel it's a necessity to protect our territories. And I think that's important for ACE. It's important because it's also what are we using the capacity of young, smart indigenous peoples? Is it to implement indigenous knowledge into these systems, into the UN systems, or do we need to fight for our basic human rights and our rights for culture? And that means that we are losing a lot of capacity that could be used on addressing climate change to every time fight for our own rights. And why are we doing it? We know that indigenous people territories control around about 80% of the world biodiversity. It means that these are the areas which the most rich, most life forms lives today. And it's also those territories we need to protect when addressing climate change, and also needs to protect So we need, when we're talking about ACE, talking about people in climate change, we need to see indigenous peoples. We need to see the work that's already been done, and that's to the states, implement that knowledge. But how do you start a conversation with indigenous peoples on this? It's always by being based on rights. Our rights to take a part of the discussion, but also the right to say no when it's a project we don't want to be involved with. Last year in Norway, it was a court case where a wind industry company lost a case in the Supreme Court of Norway because of violation of the ICCPR Article 27 on our rights to a culture. And this means that ACE is not only about good practices, it's also a necessity for states. It's a necessity to have good processes and also to avoid large lawsuit litigations and so on, to work together with the people to actually find climate solutions. And I think that's really important to highlight. It's not about, we're not trying to be difficult. We're trying to protect our way of living. We're trying to protect nature. We're trying to protect the livelihoods and the biodiversity in the areas we are living. And that means that we need help to actually be able to share the knowledge, to share the practices, but it's always based in rights and rights to be a part of the process. A few Saami reindeer herding districts are having 3 or 4 consultations every week almost. Always new companies, states asking for input on large processes, several hundred pages of documents, and always going to say, what do you mean about this? What do you say about this? And that means, but always it's on from the state or from the company. And if they're saying no, they're coming back 3 or 4 months later, starting the process over and over again. And it's hard to take part of those processes when you never know that you can say no, say, okay, and then this is over. Then you always have to be in a constructive dialogue. And I feel that many is quite tired of being in those processes. And that's also a danger of ACE, because then the state can say, we are having consultations. But it's not feeling the same for the people on the other side of the table who feel they are being bombarded by new projects, new ideas, and always have to answer on the premises of the states or from the companies and not on our rights for our own livelihoods.
Thanks very much for sharing. I think it's also a very important perspective to really keep in mind, and it's addressing really some interesting challenges relating to ACE. So thank you very much for sharing. I would like to take a last question for all the panel. And that last question would be, and you can really answer it either or both at national or international level, as you feel that you really want to answer. But towards COP27, of course, this is a process, but really towards COP27, what do you want to see happening in relation to ACE in its content of what it is? So it could be really within this process of the UNFCCC, but it could also be really like at the national level in the content of it. So maybe I will start again from this end, and I don't know if you want to start, Lasse?
I would start to say that I would like to see more capacity building for states and states delegations on indigenous people's rights, and to take part of discussions, so we don't have to start on scratch every time on indigenous rights, and to really see the benefits of working together with indigenous peoples. So more capacity building for parties is my message.
Thank you very much. Nathan?
Thank you, and maybe it's me who loves the reporting and measurement and evaluation aspect of it all. So I can be the one nerd in the room, and that's fine with me. But I think the progress on those areas, especially currently, in the discussions, the negotiations here, and beginning to implement and advance our understanding of ACE through those tools. So let me just leave it there.
Thank you very much. Massiel.
I mean, you could have gone into depth if you have any proposals, but okay. Well, we finished our last informal consultation today on ACE, and some of the colleagues that were there this morning are here, and there was a lot of work. There was a lot of very rich discussion, a lot of very interesting proposals. And with that said, it's really hard for me to say any one or two things that I would like to see on the road to charm. I think that if I would have to speak on a national level, I would love to see some of the initiatives that are being proposed back home being picked up so that we have a larger ground base of information when we arrive to the COP. And on the international level, I do want to congratulate the effort of not only the ACE Observatory, but also entities like the ECOS community, who I know have tried so hard to get the point across using the platform that has been the SB. So with that, I would like to see that when we arrive to the COP, it's a lot easier for us to actually have the action plan for the following 4 years. That's what I would really like to see.
Thank you very much, Massiel. And yeah, thank you very much for also recognizing the efforts of civil society. Johanna, you will have the last word before we go to Isatis.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, as Massiel said, at the international level, for me, it's really difficult this week because I was in Bonn last week and we had been beginning the ACE action plan discussion about ACE with civil society, with Observer, with ACE dialogue, with a workshop. But then I leave on Saturday, so I couldn't follow the discussion of this week. So I hope that we have a very good ACE action plan for the COP27 that guideline all ACE activities for the parties in the ACE program on Glasgow. No, on the program of Glasgow about ACE, we have like 70 activities that in this moment each party could take and implement some of them. So we have a big guideline in the program, and now in the action plan we expect to have a specific objective for the next 4 years. So that is the big line that we have. And at the national perspective, we expect to have the final version of the Chile ACE and capacity building strategy for the last part of this year, approved by the Council of Ministers for Sustainability and Climate Change. And this is very important because on Monday we published our framework law of climate change. So now we have the legal framework to do, and something that's important in our case is this law integrates the Ministry of Education because citizens and people in the public consultation was really interested in that the Ministry of Education should be in the law because the awareness of the people and the integration of climate change in the formal university education in all of levels of education. So for the Chilean people, it's very important to integrate the ACE element in all the implementation of the climate change policies. Yeah, that's thanks very much for the space and regards from Santiago.
Thank you so much, and also congratulations. It's looking really interesting steps forward. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for all your answers and really engaging in this discussion, ranging from really the content of ACE to the really its reporting and how to make it meaningful to really enhance all these essential elements to create really people-centered climate action. So with that, I would like to give the floor to Isatis Cintron, who is going to share more now about the ACE Observatory.
Thank you so much. I think you have my presentation there, so maybe I'll just tell you next slide. Thank you everyone for being here. It's Wednesday, we're almost done here, so coming into a panel to talk about monitoring and reporting. I'm very grateful for you to be here. So I would like to say a little bit about what we're here for. I'm part of the ACE Observatory. We've been part of the negotiations, and we have heard a little bit about how they went today. There was a lot of concerns about certain topics, and I think some of what we're hearing and some of the, I guess, roadblocks, it's also coming from some of what Johanna was telling us about that lack of general understanding on what ACE is. There's a lot of perspective, so different countries are coming at it through different angles. So I think that is some of it. Like, of course, there's a lot of national context, etc. So the ACE Observatory aims to bridge the gap between the expectation of civil society and practitioners and the actions of the government. And to this end, we have developed a process, a community co-design process, to try to come up with general understanding of what effective ACE implementation means. So for that end, then we will go into some of the definitions and then establish capacity. So if you can go to the next slide. So right now we're on phase 1, and we had 4 roundtables, which I will talk a little bit more in detail. But basically, once we launch, we want to be of help to countries to try to monitor and report and provide the tools to try to aggregate the data and then help them in the creation of their own reports. Then have that peer-to-peer exchange age, because we think that if we are monitoring and reporting ACE, there's a way to see between different countries where are others succeeding and see in what way they can connect to elevate and strengthen those activities. And then we also want to provide stakeholder mapping. So through stakeholder mapping, nations will be able to see some of the activities that non-state actors are doing, and then they can use them as implementation partners or other forms of collaboration. If you can go to the next slide. So we have a draft of an ACE assessment framework that is launching today. This is the first version, the first iteration, and what we really want is people to go and provide feedback into what are these definitions, what might be missing. So the goal of this framework is to assist countries in identifying their capacity gaps and possible steps in achieving effective ACE implementation. The contents of this framework are co-designed benchmarks and suggested actions needed to improve climate governance and capacity for people-centered climate action. Can you go to the next slide? So how do we do it? So we first did a round of literature review to try to understand what are the possible indicators, metrics that are out there, and try to aggregate that in a way that could provide people information into coming, because a lot of people know, they live ACE, right? Like they're like, this is the way that I want climate action to be implemented. But when you talk about metrics, it's a little bit more complicated. So we just wanted to give them some sort of suggestions into what is out there in the world, just as a form of an example. So we did a literature review and then went into the roundtables. We had 4 roundtables. We had people from more than 50 countries coming up to the roundtables, and in aggregate, like we'll say that around a little bit more than 100 people from all different levels that we have. ACE national focal points from different countries. We have civil society. We had local governments show up, and then also administrators and practitioners. And so now, then that we have the framework aggregated, then we're launching the community review in order for us to strengthen that with maybe other areas that we might have found that we need more discussion, like further discussion. So that's how that's going to be evolving in the next few months. So in terms of the roundtables, we had 4, as I said before, and we interpret ACE apart from, I mean, like every time that you hear about ACE, everyone is listing the 6 activities, and honestly, by the 4th, probably you forgot the first 3. So we normally try to agglomerate this into capacity building and governance, because we think that at the heart of ACE, that's what it's trying to do, take actions that are more participatory, and then also have an informed society that can really be integrated into the action of climate. So these are kind of the, I'm not going to go into them, but these are some of the things. So we did one table on climate competencies. So that covered 3 of the areas of ACE, of like the traditional elements of ACE, that's public awareness, education, and training. We went into feasibility, even though ACE doesn't go into that, but we know that most of the challenges that we have is on technical capacity and resources. So we had a table about that, and then of course the networking aspect was spoken into that, and then we had public participation and transparency and accountability. There was a lot of overlap between these last 2, because obviously we know that we need access to information in order to have effective public participation. So in terms of the structure of the report, we had established benchmarks. So the benchmarks are the definitions that set the point of reference for the climate action that we want, so for each dimension. And we have identified 6 dimensions, which you can see in the flyer that we just worked, the 1-pager, which is actually 2 pages. You can see the definitions there. And then inside of that, of the benchmark, there is identified elements of quality that people were bringing up. And then you go into actions. And then the actions have been organized into different levels. So what we really wanted with this framework is to figure it out, where does the country want to be, and what sort of activities from the whole community they believe they need to be at that level. So we start at approaches. So that means, like the country is starting to do some progress into getting into the benchmark, then meets the benchmark, and then exceeds it. So that's the structure that we have from the report, and we hope that this will be informative and helpful for the different countries in order to assess what do they need and where they can go for more support in developing that peer-to-peer network, and also what kind of stakeholders might be able to help them, etc. So it's not meant to be prescriptive of actions. It's just a list of activities, and of course, it will not be applicable at every in every context. But this is what the ACE community, when it came together, thought that would be a great starting point to start establishing that international framework. So with that said, I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much. And we're going to maybe go into an interactive session because it's so late. So we have in the back all the actions that are in the framework. And we would love for you to start engaging with them, maybe through like Post-it notes. So there will be people that can maybe walk you a little bit through them. So this is the start of the community review, but it is online. If you go like to the back of that one pager, you'll be able to add more comments. But this is like a start, and we wanted not to be here for a very long time just talking at you, but just be in communication with you. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the back.